Our story begins and we see a beautiful woman walking towards the podium wearing a white wedding dress, and she is about to get married. And we can see on her face she is making every effort to appear calm and composed on her wedding day, despite the nervous flutter in her heart. But it's hard to ignore the taunts and hatred in the eyes of the wedding guests or even lust. The joy and happiness that typically fills the air during weddings was missing on her special day. And the scene shifts. We see the priest begins the wedding ceremony. The priest,
"Let all creation worship you, in the arms of the Almighty Creator."
Protagonist feel bad because priest prayers will never become true. And today, she is marrying the man who will eventually going to kill her in the end. The priest,
"I now pronounce you husband and wife."
Suddenly we see a flashback of her past life. A guy asking her for money, but she rejects him by saying,
"Do you know how much money I already gave you, Uppa? Can you even pay me back?"
And the guy shut her up and reminds her that he was the savior of her life and she owes him her life. And in his anger, the guy pushed her down the stairs and she fell to her death. And she found herself in a different person's body and she realized she had been reincarnated as Edith. Protagonist remembers,
"This is the character from the novel I was reading last night. And in this story, Edith Rigglehoff, I plays the role of the simple, ignorant, greedy villain whose love becomes twisted into jealousy. In novel, I constantly scheming to get rid of Rhise. Rhise Sinclair is the illegitimate daughter of a count. She's a young lady who possesses the beauty of spring flowers. Because of her birth, she was tormented by her family. Her childhood was full of problems, but her problems last until the day she meets the Rudwick's brothers. Soon, she became their ward. And so begins the fierce competition between the two brothers for Rue's heart. And in this story, I'm portraying the role of an evil person.
Despite having a doting father and never once having to worry about money. While lost in thought, the maid skillfully dressed her up and tells her her father was waiting for her. She was overjoyed and eager to see her father, so she ran to meet her father. She is also contemplating the mistakes Edith made in the novel and feels responsible for fixing the mistakes. Protagonist,
"If I can pull this off, I might finally live a happy life with a loving family."
She greets her father with the hopes and dreams of better life, but her all dreams and hopes of a new life shattered. Her father started yelling at her for being late, criticized her by calling her lazy, and instructed her to stop loitering by the door and closed it. Suddenly a prompt window pop up. It says identity confirmed. And her memory synchronization begins. She falls into Edith's memories and sees the reality. In her memory, Edith was begging for forgiveness.
"I promise, I won't make another mistake again, Father."
She's shocked to see the reality. Protagonist,
What on earth is happening? She was supposed to be the spoiled, arrogant villain, but the reality was nothing like her public image. She was abused and exploited to the core. She wore fancy dresses and lots of jewelry everywhere she went. It was like her family's name was written all over her. She was a walking billboard for her family. But at home, she became the target of everyone's anger. Even the servants would join in hurting her. She was the most valuable doll of the Rigglehoff family.
And we see Edith questions to protagonist.
"So? You think you can do it?"
And we see our protagonist come back to the present where her father scolds her for not paying attention to him and warns her not to make any mistakes today and says our enemies are just looking for an excuse to bring me down.
Protagonist question herself why in this life and the last. Why I'm always stuck with such terrible families.
In next scene we see how the two noble family become rivals. In the beginning both families were equally powerful. But Count Rudwick became a decorated war hero and was promoted to the rank of Duke. Our Rigglehoff family, however, believed that the title of Duke had been unfairly taken from them. To uncover information that could expose the Rudwicks, they attempted to marry Edith into their family as a spy. The protagonist fought back tears and gathered her strength, determined to seize the opportunity and create her own success. Now protagonist.
There's a tiny glimmer of hope, if you can even call it that. I've learned how to survive in tough situations.
We find our protagonist lost in thought, contemplating how every villain in a romantic fantasy novel invariably faces trials and tribulations at the starting of their journey. Protagonist.
I just need to make sure I don't do what Edith did in the original story.
In her new life, our protagonist finds herself reincarnated as Edith. Edith is a fictional character in a novel, and the protagonist was reading it before her murder last night. However, the novel's writers did not portray Edith as a good person. And the protagonist wants to live Edith's life on her own terms, rather than following the story that the writer penned for Edith. The protagonist lost in her thoughts, and we see she has arrived to Rudwick Manor. The protagonist stood in awe, gazing at the immense, beautiful and breathtaking Rudwick Manor. Protagonist.
Rudwick Manor looks as extravagant as ever. No wonder Count Riegelhoff becomes so jealous when his rival leaves in a place like this.
Edith's father wears a smug expression, comment on Duke and Duchess family.
It's not what's outside that matters. They all are hollow from the inside, all of them.
And the scene shifts, and we see a butler kindly welcoming Count Riegelhoff to the grand halls of Rudwick Manor. As we see Edith's father, we witness his two-faced nature. Suddenly, within the grand halls of Rudwick Manor, he started treating Edith with unexpected kindness. Edith's father.
Come, my lovely daughter, let's go inside.
The protagonist feels a sudden awkwardness as she witnessed the swift 180-degree change in her father's behavior. Unfazed, protagonist decides to play along, assessing the situation. It's fine. She thinks,
I can handle this. What is more important now is to find my place in the Rudwick Manor, because it's the main stage of the original novel.
The scene shifts to the extravagant dining hall of Rudwick Manor, where our protagonist, the Lady Edith Riegelhoff, was welcomed by Mr. Duke and Mrs. Duchess. The protagonist, astounded to see these fictional characters have stepped out of her book and into reality. Protagonist.
I can't believe it. I've only ever imagined the main characters, but now I'm meeting them in real life.
She sees an old couple and guesses this old couple must be the Duke Axel Rudwick, and she must be Duchess Jocelyn Rudwick. Mrs. Duchess Jocelyn.
I hope the journey treated you well. You must be feeling hungry. Dinner will be ready soon.
Protagonist's gaze shifts, locking onto the enigmatic figure of Cliff, the male lead character of this story. Protagonist.
He's just as ridiculously handsome as I imagined. He possesses chiseled features, a confident demeanor, and an air of mystery. I could drown in those golden eyes.
The protagonist's gaze shifts to the second main character.
Rhise, a girl who has suffered Edith's cruelty in the novel. As described in the book, Rhise possesses the beauty of a blonde spring flower, her presence leaving everyone breathless. So then the man beside her should be the man I'm about to marry.
Our protagonist, within just a single gaze upon the man, Edith, our protagonist, started drooling as if she had stumbled upon something so delicious that she couldn't bear to share it with anyone. Protagonist.
Now I understand why Edith was so set on him. That sharp chin and defined nose. His first impression is cold and yet somehow sensitive. In the realm of attractiveness, he stands out as the most remarkable man one has ever encountered by me. Oh shit, he noticed me, oh my god. What I'm doing? I need to keep it together. Who cares, he's never going to be mine anyway.
Scene shifts and we see protagonist is enjoying the banquet. But Edith's father began his intricate dance of deception, weaving a web of words that masked his true intentions. Beneath the coating of care and love, a darker purpose. Edith's father.
A parent can never feel at ease sending their daughter off. On that note, I was hoping to send along with her a few maids who have been serving her since childhood. They would know best how to take care of her.
Duke and Duchess look for a moment to each other. Mrs. Duchess.
The maids of our manor are rather skilled themselves.
Edith's father.
Duchess Rudwick, are you telling me you didn't bring your own maids when you married into this family?
A hush fell over the room, a silence so profound that it seemed to freeze the air. The protagonist.
Father, I'm really fine without maids. And my future mother-in-law, please forget about my father's request. He's just worried about marrying me off, since he knows how clueless I can be.
Edith had to win the hearts of the Duke and Duchess to secure a better life far from Edith family. She crafted her strategy like a skilled baker, kneading her replies to her father with care. The scene shifts and we see Edith on her way back home. Her father scolds her for her careless actions and disobedience. The protagonist.
Father, didn't you see Duke Rudwick's face? You were being too obvious. I was so nervous. They seemed like they knew exactly why you wanted to send those maids with me. The whole purpose of this marriage is to ease their suspicions. What is the point of bringing my maids if the suspect them to be spies?
Edith's father.
But what do you think you'll be able to do there on your own?
The protagonist.
Think this through, Father. At first, I'll enter the manor alone. Like you said, I can't do anything on my own. If nothing happens, they'll let their guard down over time. First of all, we need to win over their trust. After I win their trust, I will say I am homesick or make up some other excuse. And bring over some maids from home for a short while.
Edith's father, swayed by the protagonist's eloquent explanation, nodded in reluctant agreement. And now we find ourselves returning to the very place where our story began. We see the protagonist, against all odds, marries the very man who is going to take Edith's life in the novel. But for now, she finds relief in escaping from the hands of the Count Riegelhoff family. And we see two adorable toddlers are bringing marriage rings. The protagonist notices Killian, his eyes glaring at her with a lifeless intensity. The protagonist.
All right. Killian, I know what you're thinking. Just do the formalities and get over with it.
We see Killian placing the marriage ring on Edith's finger without even touching her, his eyes filled with disdain, and when Edith attempts to place the ring on Killian's hand, he deftly slips the marriage ring onto his own finger. The protagonist senses the hushed laughter of the crowd, their mocking eyes fixed upon her. Undeterred, she clenches her fist, determined to endure the humiliation. The protagonist.
This doesn't changes anything. It's not like I wanted your attention anyway.
She ignores everything that just happened to her, lifting her chin with the grace of a resolute princess. And started admiring toddlers for their good work at wedding. In her mind, she imagining a new life, free from her abusive father and bothersome past, a life filled with prosperity, rest, and cherished hobbies. That's all she dares to hope for in this reincarnation. After completing all the formalities, the protagonist resting in her bedroom, sinking into the softness of the bed, she can't help but criticized about her wedding outfit. The protagonist.
I'm finally free from that dress. I can breathe again. The wedding dress was cut so low that I was worried there would be a mishap. And my heels were too high. Edith and her tastes will be the death of me.
Suddenly she hears some knock on her door and she asked them to come in. She heard a familiar voice. She turned back to see and surprised to see Rhise. Miss Rhise, what do you need? Protagonist asked. Miss Rhise.
You see, I just wanted to tell you something.
Protagonist remembered in the story something like that happened right after the wedding.
After the wedding, Rhise drops by Edith's bridal suite and she tries to apologize for Killian's rudeness. But when Rhise's apologies, it only fanned the flames of Edith's humiliation. Since Edith cannot blame the frigid Killian, she takes her anger out on Rhise instead.
How Edith reacted on Rhise's story.
You're the one who wore a white dress to my wedding. I'm the Killian's wife now. Stay away from my husband.
The protagonist.
To be fair, I don't blame Edith for being furious. But I'm not Edith. I have no reason to get angry at the protagonist, Rhise.
We've reached an understanding in this story that Rhise is the protagonist. Miss Rhise.
I wanted to apologize for Killian's behavior today. I hope you won't think too badly of him. Killian might look cold and standoffish, but he's actually a king and caring person beneath that hard outer shell.
Protagonist thinks in her mind.
There's no way I can hate such a cute little girl. With her flowing, blonde looks that sparkle like sunshine and her azure blue eyes that twinkle like a lake at dawn. If I want to survive in a romantic fantasy plot like this one, I better befriend her now.
The protagonist.
Don't worry, Miss Rhise. I understand he may be unhappy that he was forced into as arranged marriage for both of our family's sake. I don't plan on holding that against him.
Miss Rhise.
Lady Edith, you're such a mature and understanding person.
The protagonist is charmed by Rhise's charisma and begins to flatter Rhise. The protagonist.
I can't compare to your kindness. Rhise, you looked great in that dress today, or perhaps the dress looks good because you're the one wearing it.
After some conversation and exchanging compliments, they bid each other farewell. Later we witness the protagonist unwinding in a bath after a tiring day. Protagonist.
As a duchess-to-be, I bet my maids will prepare baths for me from now on.
She compares her new life with the previous one.
So what if there's no internet here? It's a small trade-off for not working and no household chores. I'll never need to worry about bills, annoying coworkers, or my gambling addict brother. In this new life, I will fill my days with opera, picnics, tea parties, and balls.
Suddenly a voice came from behind her. She was shocked to see Killian in the bedroom. According to the book, Killian shouldn't be in the bridal suite tonight. Killian.
Why are you so surprised? Who else would come into the bridal suite other than the bridegroom? What a heartless bride you are.
The protagonist replies.
Oh, I didn't think you wanted to come tonight. You weren't exactly hiding it, Killian. You didn't even let me put the ring on your finger during the wedding.
Killian tries to intimidate the protagonist by criticizing her.
What did you expect then? Did you expect me to fall over you like a lovesick fool?
Instead of getting mad or angry, she thinks about Killian's looks.
Oh my god, he looks even more handsome up close. Anyway, making him madder at me won't help, and I honestly don't have the energy to argue with him.
The protagonist replies.
I'm just telling it as I saw it. I noticed that you didn't want to touch me, so I didn't expect you to come here tonight. So are you planning to sleep here tonight with me?
Protagonist tries to tease him. Killian fails to provoke the protagonist, and his attempt to insult the protagonist goes in vain. In full of rage, Killian flinches, turns around, and runs out of the room. Running through the hallway, someone calls Killian from behind and questions him.
Were not you going to Lady Edith's room?
Killian sees that it is none other than Rhise.
Rhise, I did go, but she was not looking forward to tonight, either. She is dozing off in the bathtub by herself. Rhise, don't you know what Count Riegelhoff? You can't trust the words that come out of a Riegelhoff's mouth. You never know whether they are complimenting you or mocking you. You need to always be careful around them.
So, was what Lady Edith said to me admiring me and my dress earlier a lie? Perhaps I shouldn't have taken her words at face value.
She made a negative comment about a dress that you didn't even choose yourself.
No, not negative. Killian, she must have felt terrible, but she couldn't even tell me that.
She must have felt terrible. Just look at her. How her wedding dress was. She had no right to complain about your dress. Her wedding dress was over the top and ridiculously ostentatious. Yes, it was vulgar.
Vulgar? She's your wife, Killian. How could you say such a thing?
And Rhise gets angry at Killian, and Killian tries to calm Rhise's anger. Suddenly a voice calls Rhise from behind, and it turns out to be Cliff. And we can sense there's a rivalry between the two brothers for Rhise's love. As the scene shifts, we see that it's morning and the protagonist has just woken up from slumber.
Wow, I can't believe I woke up so early, especially after yesterday's ordeal.
She appreciates her new, healthy 22-year-old body. Protagonist.
I have to look on the bright side. I have this healthy body. After all, perhaps I can win over the Duke and Duchess. Even if Killian is focused on Rhise, the protagonist of this story, my in-law might be different. The Rudwicks were generous enough to take Rhise in as a ward. With time, they might open up their hearts to me too. Although I didn't make a good first impression on them. Alright, I'll visit them for breakfast.
One of the best ways for a villain to survive in a romantic fantasy novel is to win over the key supporting characters. If the protagonist wants to survive in the Rudwick family, the opinions of the Duke and Duchess, her in-laws, are the most important.
After all, my ultimate goal is to lead a quiet life of leisure in this manor. To do that, I need to earn their trust. Any in-laws would appreciate their new daughter-in-law dropping by to greet them the morning after the wedding. As this appears to be the bell rope I've read about in the books, it's so cool. Right. With the help of my maid, I can transform into a demure daughter-in-law in no time.
She rings the bell and suddenly a maid appears out of thin air. The protagonist asks for her help to get dressed. The maid shows her some dresses, but our protagonist doesn't like them at all. They are quite revealing and vivid. Protagonist.
I can't visit my in-laws in a dress like this. I'm embarrassed just thinking about it.
The protagonist asks the maid to make some changes to the dress.
Tell the seamstresses to cover up the cleavage on this dress and take off the excessive decorations.
As the scene shifts, we see that all the dresses have been prepared as the protagonist requested.
Wow, she's very obedient. I did not have to say it twice. I guess this is normal. The Riegelhof maids were the exception.
The protagonist suddenly remembered the previous night's incident and how Killian had behaved. She briefly considered leaving a bit of blood on the sheets but quickly dismissed the idea.
Never mind. If I did something like that on my own, Killian would be freaked out. Just like in the novel, Killian is saving his virginity for Rhise. There's nothing wrong with saving his virginity, but it seems a bit much to have the secondary love interest also be a virgin. Anyway, why did he stop by last night? Just to fight with me? Well, I got to see that gorgeous face again, so it's a win for me.
The protagonist is so lost in her thoughts about Killian that she doesn't even realize the maid has finished her work. Blushing and full of love, the protagonist tries to hold back her feelings. She has already made up her mind that she will never fall in love with Killian. In the next scene, we see her greeting her in-laws.
Good morning, Your Grace. Did you have a restful night's sleep?
I had a good sleep, please have seat. You must be tired, but you still dropped by early in the morning. Are you feeling nervous around us?
The protagonist sees there is only one teacup on the side of the table.
They must have already heard that Killian didn't sleep in the bridal suite.
Suddenly Duke Rudwick intervenes.
Right, Edith, I know the Count adored you and treasured you. I'm curious if you know what duties will be as the lady of the household.
Thankfully, the protagonist has Edith's memories. Protagonist.
I can handle the ledgers and administration. I'm open to learning your preferred methods if you're willing to teach me.
I see. Your father taught you those specific skills, if nothing else.
Protagonists realize they don't view her favorably. They suspect she's here to spy on Rudwick's and didn't anticipate being accused of spying so directly. Protagonist.
If you don't trust me with that yet, I'm happy to learn other tasks. I will try my best to learn quickly.
I'm glad your father has taught you well. In that case, why don't you help me with my tasks, starting in 2 weeks? If you need something before then, you can tell me now.
Thank you. Then perhaps can you find someone to show me around the ground?
Who? Killian should help you with that.
He would never. He didn't even sleep in the bridal suite on the night of our wedding.
Never mind. I'll find someone for you to show you around the manor.
After the chit-chat, the protagonist leaves the room and takes a breath of relief. The atmosphere in the room had been suffocating. However, just as she exhales, she inadvertently collides with someone outside the room. Looking up, she is taken aback to find the head of household administration standing before her, but just like Anna, the protagonist's maid, he is not mentioned in the novel. This place feels like its own reality rather than the plot of a book. Then the butler leads the protagonist through the entire mansion, showing her the armory room and the main library, where the most precious jewels are stored. The protagonist is amazed by the Rudwick's wealth. Protagonist.
Can I come to read here any time, or do I need to get permission?
As a member of the Duke's family, you can visit at any time. The same applies to Sistine Hall, where new artworks are displayed monthly.
In the protagonist's past life, she couldn't even afford to go to the local art gallery. Here, there's a gallery in the house. She is so happy to have everything in her new life that she had dreamed of. The protagonist asks the butler to show her the exquisite hall and the art gallery. He shows her the hall. After some time. Butler.
Since the grounds are too extensive to cover in just one day, we will end the tour here for today and continue tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Rhinon. I'm excited to live in such a magnificent house.
The protagonist praises him for the day.
I was just doing my duty. If you have time the day after tomorrow, we'll finish the rest of the tour then. And I suppose I should tell you about this place on our way back. We are at the Grand Gazebo.
Out of curiosity, protagonist asks about the Grand Gazebo?
Yes. It's the perfect place to see the grounds. When we have guests over, we invite them here. Also, the Duke and Duchess enjoy spending time here.
Suddenly, the butler felt a chilling silence settle in. It was as heavy as Mount Everest. The protagonist silently watches Killian having a tea party with another woman, which crushed the protagonist's heart and left her frozen in shock. She takes a deep breath and pretends as if it did not affect her at all. In an attempt to sympathize with the protagonist's situation, the butler expressed his concern.
Why would the young master be in the company of another woman just a day after his wedding?
Perplexed, the protagonist scratched her head and wondered.
What would happen if Edith were here instead of me?
Despite her internal turmoil, the protagonist suppressed her feelings, thinking, I don't care. I'm only interested in enjoying the lavish facilities in this manor. The protagonist finally began acting as if nothing had happened, to maintain composure. As the scene shifted, the butler shared detailed observations of the protagonist's intelligence and appreciation for the art gallery in Sistine Hall to Duke Rudwick. The butler noted the protagonist's dignified demeanor, which stood in contrast to circulating rumors. Furthermore, the butler mentioned an incident that happened in the gazebo garden involving Miss Rhise and both young masters having tea. Duke Rudwick expresses disappointment at the Killian's actions, despite advising caution against providing any grounds for Editha to find fault within Rudwick.
To think he was chatting with another woman to the next morning after his wedding, despite advising cautioned.
We see a flashback where Duke Rudwick instructs Killian to control Edith until the end of the year to prevent Count Riegelhoff from allying with Grand Duke Langston. The butler.
But Lady Edith didn't seem to care at all.
What?
Although I couldn't read her mind, she did not raise a fuss or become agitated. She left as if she hadn't seen anything.
It looks like we shouldn't underestimate her.
Then the scene shifts. We see the protagonist had just finished the delicacies.
Let me clean up if you are done with your meal, ma'am.
Okay, thanks, Anna, for your help.
Protagonist in her mind.
I couldn't afford to eat out often in my past life, so I'm not used to others serving me.
The protagonist also shows her kind side to her maid by asking if she had a chance to eat lunch. If not,
you should go and eat. I will call you if I need you.
Anna the Edith maid was surprised. It was the first time someone had cared for her.
I made a good impression on the Duke and Duchess. Now the only problem is how to act around Rhise.
The Rhise Sinclair was born to be the main character of this world, but her life was full of turmoil before she arrived at Rudwick's manor. She was the part of the Sinclair family first, and the Sinclair children used to bully Rhise for her illegitimate birth. She was the victim of their undisguised persecution. Then one day, she saved Mrs. Duchess Rudwick from falling off her horse and caught the Duchess's attention, and they were furious to learn about the young gentle Rhise is being abused. So, the Rudwicks asked for custody of Rhise in exchange for forgiving a large loan. The Sinclairs were quick to hand over custody, but they later regretted their decision when they realized they had lost the chance to marry into the Rudwick family. Rhise ends up with a happy ending and all the luck in the kingdom. Unlucky protagonist.
My life was filled with misfortune from start to finish. At work, I was bullied by my manager, who was only a year older than me. After work, I ended my relationship with my boyfriend, who had chosen to sleep with another woman instead of spending time with me. After that, I was on my way home to escape into my favorite web novels. And that was the end of me. I wonder what my brother did after I died on those stairs. Did my parents cry over my death? They probably cared more about my brother than me. Right, who cares about them? I'm going to focus on myself first.
After doing all the self-motivation stuff, she moves on with the all-negative thoughts, and she spots Rhise in the garden sitting alone under the tree reading a book.
Maybe I should try to get close to her. Anything's better than standing around doing nothing.
Suddenly, Killian appeared near Rhise, emerging from behind the tree out of nowhere.
What are you reading, Rhise?
Oh, a book about the history of the imperial court. I never received any formal education about this, and I don't want to embarrass His Grace with my ignorance.
Sure, if learning can give you fulfillment, please let me know how I can assist you in any way.
That's exactly what a secondary love interest would say. If it were Cliff, he would tell her to focus on being happy, nothing else. I'll give you the world, you only focus on me. Stuff like that. Whatever. It's too late to approach Rhise, and I don't want to eavesdrop.
Rhise asks Editha's whereabouts to Killian.
But Killian, where is Edith? And why are you alone, Killian? Have you been avoiding Edith all day?
Rhise, you don't need to mind her so much. We're just keeping her here for a little while as a hostage.
So that's how he thinks of me.
And scene shit to Sinclair Manor, and we introduce to Layla Sinclair. We see the youngest daughter of Count Sinclair pulling her hair furiously because Killian got married to Editha.
Why does it have to be her of all the women in the world? Why choose that woman?
And next, we are introduced to one more new character, the oldest son of Count Sinclair, Damien Sinclair. He was enjoying her younger sister's temper, and Layla Sinclair got suspicious of her brother's calm demeanor.
Brother, you know something, don't you? So, what's the secret? Stop stringing me along and cut to the chase.
As impatient as ever. Now, let's think this through. What will motivate them to marry each other? What would be the two families get out of joining their houses? First, Count Rhise holds the rights to the iron mine in the southern mines. That means he has the raw material needed to manufacture weapons. Now, here's a question for you. Why might that be important right now?
Maybe, weapons. How should I know?
Ooh. My dear sister, it's okay, you do not have to think about it much.
What, that's not good news for me. Are you teasing me? You said you'll explain why they needed to marry.
Sure, that's what everyone thinks. But Layla, this is where it gets interesting. Is Count Rhise truly under the control?
With that, we see a flashback where Editha is being abused by her father for not spying on Duke Rudwick and not providing any information. As a consequence, she would not receive dinner till the next week if she didn't manage to obtain any information. Damien Sinclair has taken aback by seeing this version of Editha Rhise. Editha was never the cold and cunning villain she pretended to be. Layla is shocked to know the reality of Editha Rhise.
It may be hard to believe, but I saw it with my own eyes. Let's see how this all plays out. Once the perfect moment comes to reveal this truth, I can end the Rhise.
The scene shifts and we are returned to the present moment where Butler showing the left places of Manor. While the protagonist thinks about what she is going to do after this.
Now what should I do in my free time?
You don't worry about that. Her Grace said that she will give you tasks starting today.
Really? I was getting so bored and antsy doing nothing all day.
You can visit Mrs. Dutch now. Her office is down the hall, right, the third door on the left.
I feel like I've already memorized the entire mansion's layout. Thanks, Renan. I think I'm a pretty good student, don't you agree?
It would be strange to forget after a week of repetition. Yes, you are a pretty good student.
Welcome, Lady Edith.
Miss Rhise. Oh my, so we get to work together. I'm so glad. It's my first time, so I hope to learn a lot from you.
Ho ho, looks like you've grown close already.
I should have greeted you first, Mother.
No, don't worry about that. And Rhise, can you explain the documents which you were organizing for Lady Edith?
Sure.
The protagonist.
Are you waiting for someone?
Then Rhise explains her Grace called the seamstresses in. Suddenly protagonist remembers it's a major plot point of the story, where Mrs. Dutch is going to give both Rhise and Edith to choose a dress, and obviously she will prefer the design Rhise picks, or she will pick both designs and get more compliments wearing Rhise's choice, and we see the protagonist choosing the designs regardless of knowing the outcome which has already decided.
Aside from being the star of the show, Rhise had 5 years to learn the Duchess's taste. In comparison to me, I have only ever seen dresses like this in web novel illustrations. What should I do? Rhise picked a design already. And everyone appreciating Rhise's picked design and complimenting how good it going to be look on Mrs. Duchess's fair skin, and the blue silk will highlight her amber eyes.
Mrs. Duchess asks Edith if anything catches her eye.
It's hard to choose because Rhise made such an excellent choice.
But still, she shows a dress to the Mrs. Duchess.
If you ever want to change up your wardrobe, a dress like this might do the job. Protagonist in her mind, only few women can appreciate the unique color combination of this dress. But only mature ladies like the Mrs. Duchess can pull off flashy outfits like that. I'm not trying to win this competition either way. Beating the main character will only work against me in the end.
The protagonist.
Mother, your beauty and elegance would bring this dress to life.
You are making me blush, then I suppose I'll trust your judgment. Those are the 2 dresses for me now, so shall we choose a dress for Rhise?
Then Mrs. Duchess selects some designs for Rhise and Edith helps her in choosing the right dress.
Rhise has the flawless skin and rosy cheeks to match this dress.
Goodness, you're right. You certainly have an eyes for these things, Edith. What do you think about this white dress with the empire waist?
I'm sure she would look good in that dress, but it might make her look too young. If we are looking for a simple, white dress, how about this robe?
You are right. She could add an aquamarine brooch for a splash of color.
Mrs. Duchess requested Shemsters for 5 dresses, but Mrs. Duchess forget about Edith.
Oh my, where's my head at? You need to choose a design for yourself, Edith.
Edith refuses to get a new dress and instead asks for her old dresses to be altered. From the protagonist's perspective, the best way for a villain to survive reincarnation in a romance fantasy novel is to change how everyone perceives them. Everyone compliments Edith for her change of taste.
I'm putting in a lot efforts to get on the Mrs. Duchess's good side. I'm even started calling her mother.
In the next scene, on the way to her room, she sees Killian standing in front of her bedroom door.
Killian wouldn't come to my room for no reason. What brings you here?
Killian coldly orders Edith to follow him because Rhise has invited her to have tea. The protagonist thinks about the plot of this story. Does it happen in the actual story?
Rhise must have asked him to fetch me.
On the way, the protagonist starts admiring Killian's physique from behind.
How attractive his broad shoulders are and his slim waist. I have never been so attracted to a man's body like this. He is so hot. Is he used to be a professional swimmer or something? But don't you worry, Rhise. All I'm going to do is look to your man. Oh shit, did he notice me checking him out?
I'm warning you now. Watch what you say in front of Rhise. Rhise is practically my family. She's far more precious to me than you. Understand?
The protagonist gets angry and starts shouting at Killian.
Wow. You really know how to hurt a woman.
What do you mean?
I'm human too.
Human? I thought you were a viper.
How cruel of you, Killian. Do you want me to treat Miss Rhise with the same courtesy you are showing me? It seems like you're intentionally trying to upset me and make me a villain. Unfortunately, you can't influence me so easily. Of course, the fact that you hurt me. But this is a separate issue for me.
The protagonist walks away from Killian after confronting him. And we see in the next scene the protagonist arrives at Rhise's tea party and Rhise welcomes the protagonist and invites her to sit beside her. Then, Killian joins the tea party too. During their conversation, Cliff compliments Edith on how well she has adjusted to her new life. And Cliff recommended that they consider starting on a honeymoon. Given that they are still newlyweds, this could be a wonderful opportunity for both of them to travel and spend quality time together. The protagonist in her mind.
You want to send Killian off with me and monopolize the Rhises at that time?
The protagonist replies to Cliff.
I'm not sure. Killian seems very busy with his duties and winter is almost over now, and it's the time to start exploring our lands.
Cliff expressed his agreement by nodding his head and asked Rhise.
Rhise, would you like to accompany me? You told me you wanted to travel more.
Rhise shows some hesitation in her expression and before Rhise can say something Killian intervenes.
Don't put Rhise in the difficult spot, Cliff, and Rhise you can ignore what he said.
Cliff smartly replies to Killian in a surprising tone.
Did I put her on a difficult spot? I think she would be more uncomfortable if I left right now. She would be alone with you.
The protagonist after listening to the whole conversation.
Cliff is right. When the three of them are together, they appear to be model siblings, but as soon as Cliff leaves the arrangement, everyone will see the romantic potential between Rhise and Killian. Cliff is cunning, as expected from the second main character of the story after the Rhise.
Suddenly Cliff asks the protagonist what she thinks about what he said is right. Once he leaves the manor, only the protagonist, Rhise, and Killian would be left in the manor alone. The protagonist feels as Cliff is trying to pull her legs.
Wait, what kind of strange question is that? He knows I'm not loved by anyone here. He's toying with me. No one in this household has any manners.
The protagonist answers to the Cliff's weird question.
I don't care either way. Do whatever you like to do.
To Edith's response, Cliff makes a surprised face.
Wait.
Touring the land is a part of your duties as the heir, Cliff. You'll do what you need to do. It's not my place to tell you whether or not you should go. As far as taking Rhise along, however, I honestly think that seems a bit presumptuous on your part. Traveling such long distances by carriage is exhausting. And it's not like she's your wife. Don't you think that requesting her to accompany you is a bit extra? I don't know if it sounds unreasonable.
After all the conversations between protagonist and Cliff, Rhise gives a suspicious response with her smile which shocks the protagonist as she's seen something out of the character.
What was that? Perhaps I saw wrong. Yeah, she's not the person I need to beware of.
We see Killian standing alone beneath the sky, contemplating what the protagonist said earlier. It feels like the beginning of new storylines where love and destiny intertwine. And then suddenly someone calls Killian and it turns out to be Rhise.
What are you doing out here on the terrace by yourself at this hour? Is something troubling you?
Killian replies nothing is bothering him and he asks about the dresses she ordered today and shares how excited his mother was to see her in some new dresses.
Yes, she's already bought me so many dresses. It always makes me feel bad.
My mother always envied you. You have nothing to feel bad about it. I should be thanking you for being such a good daughter to her. After all, her husband and even her sons all became knights.
Rhise ignores Killian and mentions the protagonist's actions, how the protagonist didn't buy any dress for herself today. Killian with a surprising face asks Rhise, what do you mean by buying Edith's dresses? Rhise tells Killian,
Edith didn't buy a single dress today. She only asked for alterations to her existing dresses. She spent all her time picking out dresses for me and her grace.
Killian misunderstands Edith's intentions and starts speculating all the wrong things about Edith's.
The woman who never wears the same dress twice? She must have found the dresses not good enough for herself, but she was happy to order dresses for you and mother. She is truly a cunning fox.
Rhise tries to explain to Killian that what is he thinking about Edith is not right, it was not Edith's intention. But Killian totally ignores Rhise and keeps on sowing fabricates of ill thoughts about Edith.
Is she showing her disapproval of the dressmakers? That must be why she wore such an obscene dress at our wedding. But then suddenly started to dress in demure outfits. I thought I didn't find her outfit particularly grating today. If she had exposed her skin, I would have noticed immediately. Yes, that indecent and promiscuous woman. I couldn't bear to look at her.
Killian has a flashback of the protagonist.
You really know how to hurt a woman.
Do you still hate Edith that much?
She is a snake. She might be laying low in the grass for the moment, but she'll bare her fangs as soon as we let down our guard.
After speaking so much ill about Edith, Killian's still thinking of finding another dressmaker who might better suit Edith's taste and justifying it by saying he has no other choice, he has to do this for the sake of Rudwick's name. The scene shifts to Anna, who suggests to the protagonist to buy some perfume and makeup due to the shortage of it.
Me, the girl who used to put on broken lipstick while hiding in the bathroom stalls, buying luxury items. Now that I think about it, I didn't need to do all that back then. I hid because I didn't want anyone to see that no one took a good care of me, and no one loved me. Right. I had reincarnated. I should enjoy the luxuries of this life. Let's try some of the luxurious makeup from this fantasy world.
The scene shifts, we see the protagonist visit to the Sistine Hall.
I feel like I have an entire art gallery to myself. I can't believe I can appreciate such art of work up close.
She sits on the floor and gazes at the painting with admiration. Suddenly Killian's voice comes from nowhere.
What an innovative way to appreciate art.
Killian? What brings you here?
What's so surprising about me coming to appreciate art in my own house?
Yeah, that's true.
Killian teases the protagonist.
Well, since the Reigelhofs do not care much for art, I suppose you must be intrigued by the existence of the art gallery.
What is this man's problem?
The protagonist smartly replies in a very soft and kind tone.
Yes, you are right, I feel overwhelmed by this painting. How can just one painting hold so many human emotions? You can see the tragedy and brutality of war, and yet you can also see God's determination to end this tragedy. But he doesn't look pleased about all the praise he is getting. The end of any war is bitter, even if it ends in victory.
For Killian, it is surprising to see a Reigelhof with such a deep capability to think just by looking at a painting.
This painting celebrates my grandfather leading our country to victory in the war against the Yenor kingdom.
Oh, then the god must be modeled after your grandfather.
So you really didn't know?
No, I had no idea.
It's okay, but nobody's ever told me that you were an appreciator of a fine art. But
well, people sometimes change when they get older.
Then do you have a favorite artist?
I'm embarrassed to admit it, but it hasn't been long since I have taken interest, so I do not know any artists yet.
Not a single one?
He loves to make me embarrassed. Not one. As you mentioned, the Reigelhofs do not have any connection to art.
Here, Killian was genuinely interested in learning about the protagonist, but our protagonist misunderstood Killian's intentions. Moving forward in the art gallery, the protagonist notices a painting on the wall. It turns out to be a painting of Killian.
My father is close friend of a painter. He made me a model for this painting.
It is not like I asked you.
So, why do you keep staring at it like that?
No reason.
I am asking you to tell me.
Nothing important, just the thing is a bit small.
What do you mean by that just the thing is a bit small?
Killian feels a bit embarrassed in front of the protagonist, and his cheeks started turning red as peaches.
What? The body in the painting is not modeled after me.
Oh, is that so?
Of course. The son of a duke would never pose naked for a painter.
Sure, I got it.
The protagonist's reaction left Killian even more embarrassed, and he immediately leaves the place.
My life would be boring without poking fun at him like this.
The protagonist stops momentarily and goes back to Killian's painting.
Whatever, he was pretty cute when he was younger.
The scene shifts, and we see the protagonist enjoying her morning by wandering around Rudwick Manor, peacefully living her life.
It's been months since I reincarnated as Edith. I have gotten used to the peaceful low-responsibility life. Even better than I could have imagined. An in-house art gallery at my fingertips. Luxury cosmetics I can use whenever I want. Gourmet full-course meals every day. Even if there are still some people who don't think highly of me, Anna, my maid whom I spend the most time with, is always courteous.
The protagonist arrives at her true destination of her morning walks. She sees Killian and Cliff are doing sword fighting in the training ground.
As usual, my husband is full of enthusiasm today. I can't take my eyes off of him. It never gets old, the broad chest and those dense muscles. Look at those intricate muscles, the ripples on his back. He may be annoying, but he sure is eye candy. Killian is more my type than Cliff. Cliff's body is closer to the average romance fantasy male lead. But I prefer Killian's body because it's softer, and yet still fit. Oh, I should get up now or I'll be late. Thank you for the great view.
Rhise.
We can all sense that someone is jealous of Rhise. No matter how hard the protagonist tries to suppress her jealousy, she simply can't.
I never knew you could smile like that, Killian.
The scene shifts and we see the protagonist is helping Mrs. Duchess to organize some official documents. But she can't focus on.
In my 28 years of living as Suna Choi, I never thought I would fall for someone based only on their looks. But it was only because I had never seen someone so handsome in my past life. Don't get distracted. Focus! Today I need to organize the purchase records for the armory. This type of information must be pretty confidential. If they entrusted me with these documents, does that mean I have earned their trust?
Rhise suddenly appears and asks about the protagonist. What is she doing? The protagonist excitedly introduces the innovative table method she is using to efficiently summarize and organize the information found in the documents given to her by Mrs. Duchess. As she delves deeper into her task, she is taken aback to discover that tables, as she knows them, do not exist in this world.
Although tables existed for a long time in Earth's history, the author might have chosen otherwise for this fantasy world.
The protagonist tries to make her understand this table method is far better than paragraph method of documentation.
I'm sure Rhise is smart enough to see the efficiency of this approach.
Mrs. Duchess notices both Rhise and the protagonist and asks if everything is right. And Rhise replied that Edith was asking her for help with some documents about armory. Her response bit shocked the protagonist. Mrs. Duchess appreciates Rhise for helping out Edith.
Wait, I was the one explaining to Rhise. This feels like my past, similar to what my workers used to do to me.
The protagonist steps up for herself and asks Mrs. Duchess about her opinion on the table method.
Look, Mother, I organized all the documents like this because these records cover a large amount of information, so I organized it all like this.
The protagonist explains everything about tables and how they work and helps organize the information. Suddenly, the protagonist realizes that she forgot about her role as the villain and supporting character in this story. It seems like she is trying to make Rhise look bad or like a liar in Mrs. Duchess' eyes. However, in the next moment, Mrs. Duchess started to admire the work of the protagonist.
You have organized all of this so neatly, it makes it very easy to read quickly.
Do you like it, Mother?
Of course, what a brilliant method. I should start summarizing information like this from now on. Edith, can you organize all the documents you're in charge of like this? So that the others and I can learn from your example.
The protagonist becomes very happy upon hearing Mrs. Dutch's words and Rhise left to the corner of the room. In the next scene, we see Mrs. Dutch's and Killian are discussing how she invented the new method name called table by only using columns and rows to organize information. Killian also admires this new method.
Indeed, it does seem very efficient. She could also sneak away with summarized information like this.
Do not think so negatively about her, Killian. She was also forced into an arranged marriage, just like you. In fact, she also has the burden of leaving her home and living with people she doesn't know. Can't you have some sympathy for the girl?
Killian asks Rhise for her opinion on the protagonist.
She's right about everything. As she said, Edith is very knowledgeable. I never learned anything from the Sinclairs, so unlike me, she's a quick learner.
But Killian is being negative again about the protagonist, as the protagonist is specifically trained to infiltrate Rudwick Manor and gain all their secrets.
Not to mention her understanding of art that I glimpsed last time. She is not as clueless as her reputation might suggest.
The next morning, the protagonist and Killian run into each other at the start of the day, and the protagonist tries to tease Killian.
What brings you here so early in the morning? Did you come here because you missed me?
Nope, of course not. Are you implying I should get to the point and leave?
Well, would you stick around if asked to linger?
You always have to have the final word.
I never learned how to lose. It is hard to stop myself from trying to joke around with him. Never mind, I should be begging him not to kill me. Anyway, why is he here so early in the morning? Did Count Rhise antagonize him or something? Perhaps he caught me snooping on them during my walks? Or something else? Maybe Rhise was sulking about what happened yesterday? Did he come to tell me off about that? I knew I shouldn't have done that yesterday. Alright. Before he starts nagging me, I will try to ease the tension with some small talk. Wow, the weather is great, isn't it? Although the air is quite cold since it is a bit early. Oh my, what are you doing? He's too close.
Is my mother's preferred dressmaker too elegant and refined for your vulgar tastes?
Pardon me, what do you mean?
Everyone knows you never wear the same dress twice. I can't believe you, of all people, didn't buy a new dress. What a way to show your disapproval to my mother's choices.
The reason I didn't order anything was to change my extravagant image. He's even using that as a reason to hate me?
If you want another dressmaker, just tell me, I can call them for you.
Killian, you really don't know anything about me. If I didn't like the dressmaker, I would have called someone else. Do you really think I would care about what others think on a matter like that? You are just looking for excuses to hate me more. You want to blame me for everything. You want me to be reason for everything wrong. You are trying to fit me into your preconceptions. I knew the moment we walked down the aisle. You want to ease your mind by blaming me for everything. You always act like you are the victim. And that is cowardly.
Is that so? What you have observed after threatening my family to get this marriage?
Did I make those threats?
If not, who else? Are you not a Rhise too?
The protagonist to herself.
Ah, I see. Everyone in this house sees me as just another Rhise. Killian, you do not know anything about me. Nothing at all.
I heard you are skilled at assisting my mother. Please refrain from doing anything that might cause suspicion. This is the only advice I can offer you.
The protagonist falls on her knees and starts crying.
Something must have gotten into me. Who am I kidding? I cannot just stay here living in the lap of luxury. I need to start looking for ways to get out of here.
The scene shifts to Killian, who is also regretting his behavior towards Edith.
What I'm doing, I could not even keep my head straight about what I was saying. The room was filled with the fragrance of roses. She's right about everything. I only ever saw her as Count Rhise daughter. Everything I claim to know about her is all related to her father.
Suddenly a pain rushed through his head, as someone stopping him from thinking about the protagonist. A voice came through the hall. It turned out to be Rhise, who was greeting Killian. Rhise asks Killian what is happening with him. He does not look in good shape today.
It is nothing, Rhise. I am just disgusted by the pungent smell of roses. It must be because I had to speak with an irksome woman first thing in the morning.
Killian, did you bother Edith again?
Killian curses Edith.
She is just a spy sent by Count Rhise. I do not need to think any more about her.
The scene shifts to the protagonist and she asks her maid to accompany her out to light her mood.
Anna, do you want to go out and have fun with me? If I felt sad in my past life, I would get a large iced coffee in my tumbler and just walk around the town. Staying alone in the manor will only make me more depressed. Ever since I reincarnated, I have barely been outside. I am already feeling better just getting off the manor.
The protagonist collects as much information as possible to get know the outside world of this novel and spends her day with Anna.
I got everything I wanted thanks to you. Spending the day with you has also lifted my mood.
The scene shifts to the library where Edith is gathering knowledge about farming and all sorts of things that can help her out in the wild. Suddenly, Anna arrives at the library and informs Edith that her Grace is looking for her. The jewelers have arrived. And the protagonist remembers that
it is the day when Edith was shamed in front of the jeweler in this novel. This is the first major conflict between Edith and Rhise. In novel, when Edith arrives at the hall and as usual, the Rudwicks only pay attention to Rhise. However, Rhise becomes uncomfortable about Edith being ignored, so she suggests a necklace for Edith to light the atmosphere for Edith, but Edith ends up insulting Rhise for choosing such a low-quality necklace and criticizing Rhise's taste. After that, Cliff buys every jewel available for Rhise with a blank check. In the end, Edith ends up with only the necklace Rhise originally recommended. A complete triumph for Rhise.
Our story ends here. We will return soon with the new chapter.